Then a catastrophic boom ripped through the silence and shattered the brief calm in a single instant. Tam spun around in horror, his whole body going rigid. What was that? Even the earth itself seemed to groan beneath them, as if something massive had just broken loose. Namcho Min froze on the spot as the emergency siren began to wail, its shrill cry instantly turning the air into pure panic. The Count's castle had collapsed. Rift stability plunged at once. Emergency news began flashing everywhere. Russia had already started evacuating civilians immediately. Code Red had been declared. The demonic fortress had manifested in the real world. 200 innocent civilians were trapped inside the active kill zone, with no clear escape route in sight. Nations were screaming for borders to be sealed at once, while the players of Gion stood trembling before the nightmare that had now taken shape right in front of them. It was the stronghold of the vampire lord, standing there in terrible silence. Then, all at once, a presence appeared from the shadows behind them. It was none other than Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo, and unlike everyone else there, he did not look even slightly surprised by what he was seeing. So it finally fell. His voice was calm and cold, as if this outcome had been expected from the very beginning. The crowd stared at him in disbelief. "Isn't that the guy from the news?" Someone whispered, recognition spreading from one face to the next. "Is he seriously walking in there alone?" Another person blurted out. "He has to be insane." To everyone watching, it looked less like courage and more like madness. Granful Claudia Arpeggio Romeo stood tall in front of the looming fortress, his figure small compared to the monstrous structure and yet somehow impossible to overlook. There was no fear at all in his eyes. What burned there instead was open disgust, raw and unmistakable, as if the very sight of the place offended him. "That damn stone statue," he muttered with a scoff. Then he stepped into the abyss-like entrance and came face to face with a gargoyle whose maw looked packed with razors, while 5 massive blades jutted from its terrifying body. A system alert rang out at once. "You have entered the stronghold of Countra." He lifted his head and looked up at the grotesque thing with nothing but sneering contempt. Hideous craftsmanship. Silence pressed down on the space around him. Behind the monster stood an enormous gate, and Granfell Claudia Arpeggio. Romeo's voice cut cleanly through the air. "They call a trash heap like this a stronghold," he said with a sneer. "I suppose for filthy vampires. Even a pile of broken rubble passes for luxury." His face twisted with pure aesthetic disgust, and Li Hoi thought to himself that even the Claudio estate was 10 times larger than this place, even if it was not truly his real home. Then, without warning, the statue's eyes suddenly ignited with a blood-red glow, bright and vicious in the darkness. Granfell, Claudia, Arpeggio, Romeo, and Li Hoi all along with him, flinched for a split second. Did it actually hear me? The next moment, killing intent burst from the creature's eyes, and the giant behemoth leaped off its pedestal, charging straight at Granfell, Claudia Arpeggio Romeo. The wounded soldiers nearby screamed in panic, their voices cracking with fear. "What is happening?" The statue moved. No one there had been prepared for that nightmare to suddenly come alive. "Impossible. That thing is over 10 meters tall. He's going to be crushed. We have to help him." But before anyone could even take a step forward, the demon swung its enormous blade down, aiming to split Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo cleanly in half. Even then, with a movement so casual it almost felt insulting, he flicked his wrist and raised a single hand. In the very next flash, the demon's limbs were cut away cleanly, as if they had never belonged to its body in the first place. The monster collapsed and broke apart into a useless heap of shattered gravel, its massive form reduced to nothing in an instant. That thunderous crash was so loud and violent that even the Phoenix Guild, some distance away, immediately turned toward the sound. Camila shouted first, her voice sharp with alarm. "What was that explosion?" Dmitri pointed at once. "It came from the castle grounds." Camila's expression tightened into a frown as her mind raced. "That sound, it's exactly like the footage we watched online." The similarity hit them all at once. Before anyone could say another word, Jessie suddenly launched forward like a bullet. Magic circles flared to life beneath her feet, blazing brightly as her teammates shouted after her. "Jessie, where are you going? Stay with the formation. Don't do anything reckless. But the petite mage ignored every warning and rode her monocorrent straight into the chaos without hesitation. Back at the gate, the soldiers could only stand there with their mouths hanging open, too stunned to say anything at first. What? Someone finally managed to whisper. He destroyed that monster in a single strike. The disbelief in their voices said everything, because what they had just witnessed no longer felt human at all. The demon was nothing more than scattered dust and broken debris now, reduced so completely that it barely looked real anymore. Watching the remains settle across the floor, Li Hui smirked to himself, almost amused by how underwhelming the whole thing had turned out to be. In the end, it was just a slightly oversized rock, nothing more. In this mana-focused world, breaking stones was practically the most basic kind of training. That barely even counted as a warm-up. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo calmly straightened his tie with perfect elegance and muttered, "A monument to failure. The material is terrible, the execution is even worse. To put this kind of trash in a garden and call it art, shameful." Inside, Li Huial winced and thought, "Wow, you really did not have to destroy them that hard." Then, all at once, a loud war cry burst out from somewhere behind them, breaking the strange stillness that had followed the statue's fall. A whole legion of hunters came storming through the gates, roaring at the top of their lungs. "The gatekeeper has fallen. This is our chance. Charge!" The sound of boots, weapons, and shouting filled the air. In that instant, Li Huial realized the destruction of the statue was not just a victory. It was the starting signal for a full-scale raid. Ding! A translucent holographic window suddenly materialized right in front of Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo, hovering in the air with an eerie mechanical glow. His class quest had updated. Mission: begin the counterattack. He narrowed his eyes slightly as he read it. A new quest line, he thought, sounding more curious than surprised. Is this the requirement for entry? He mused. Instill the fear of the hunter. What kind of vague and ridiculous objective is that? Even so, he did not slow down for a second and simply kept walking deeper into enemy territory. Li Huial panicked immediately. "Hey, where are you going?" Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo answered without even turning back. "We do not have time to waste." Li Hui's anxiety shot up on the spot. "Wait, slow down. Think this through. We cannot just march in there like we own the place. And how exactly are we supposed to scare them? Count Aska is level 430 in this leveling and mana mess, and I'm only level 100. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's voice turned as cold as winter glass. "I am a demon hunter." Li Hui screamed internally. So what does that even mean? But before he could dwell on it any longer, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo suddenly stopped walking, his eyes sweeping over a pristine white hall glowing softly under candlelight. "Is this supposed to be a banquet hall?" he asked, his voice carrying equal parts curiosity and disapproval. And then he saw it clearly. A wave of horror and disgust washed over him at once, sharp and immediate. The walls were lined from end to end with portraits of Countess Sura, one after another without a break, as if the entire hall had been built to worship nothing but that one face. The atmosphere was so eerie and suffocating that Li Huial felt his breath catch in his throat. Instinctively, he shrank back and hid behind his avatar, as though even looking too long at those paintings might bring trouble. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the castle, a sword was driven hard into the ground with a metallic slam. Tamman leaned against it for support, gasping for breath, the veins in his neck and arms standing out from the strain. The John Guild had managed to breach the castle at last, but they had paid a price for every step it took to get that far. Damn it all! Tamman cursed under his breath as his teammates gathered behind him, battered but still standing. "Guildmaster, are you all right?" Nam Chan Min asked quickly, concern obvious in his voice. As the healers hurried over and began treating him, Tamman clenched his teeth, sweat pouring down his face in heavy drops. He looked awful, but he refused to collapse. "I'm fine," he forced out, though his breathing said otherwise. "It just feels like I'm suffocating. Ever since we entered this gallery, it's been like thousands of eyes have been staring at me from every direction." He glared at the portraits, his whole body tense. Then Nam Chan Min's voice crackled through the communication line. "It's a curse, just like the demon that possessed that statue." A split second later, realization hit him so hard it came out as a shout. Those aren't just paintings, he yelled, his voice echoing through the room. They're the demon's eyes. Burn every single one of them to ash. At once, flames surged up through the hall, and the cursed artwork was swallowed by fire as if the castle itself had finally been exposed. A soft green healing light wrapped around Taman's body, easing the crushing pressure around him little by little. The weight, it's lifting, he muttered. Then he turned his attention to the raid data displayed on his laptop. That was far too close, he said quietly. No wonder this place became a graveyard. I kept wondering why the first wave of players withdrew in disgrace. Turns out this entire castle is designed as one giant death trap from the ground up. Every statue, every portrait, every piece of furniture in here is loaded with curses and status abnormalities. No wonder the ex-girl refused to force her way through the main gate. Li Hoi clicked his tongue, impressed despite himself by that caution. His eyes turned serious. My resistance to curses is already much higher than most people's, and even then, just the portraits in the foyer carried this much malice. If the entrance alone is this rotten, then what kind of horrors are waiting deeper inside? The corridor stretching ahead seemed to ooze cold mystery, as if darkness itself had seeped into the stone. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo stood staring at the artwork for a moment longer, looking almost physically incapable of keeping his criticism to himself. These portraits are an attack on the eyes, he said flatly. How does anyone eat in front of this filth without vomiting? Do these creatures have stomachs made of steel? He strode forward with open disgust written across his face. Li Hoyal could only sigh and mutter, "Isn't that a little harsh, old man?" But Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo paid him no attention and kept scanning the room as he spoke. I thought the statues were terrible, but this is somehow even worse. Pity the poor stone and canvas that suffered only to become such monstrosities. Why would anyone fill a place with this much hideous, useless garbage? His lip curled with disdain. Now I understand why narcissism is considered a disease. Even the layout of this castle is offensively idiotic. The corridors twist around like a deranged ant nest and lead nowhere but dead ends. What sort of broken mind designs a structure like this? The architect's head must have existed only to grow hair. He pressed a hand to his temple in genuine frustration. Li Hoi was left speechless. What are you, a real estate critic? Then, suddenly, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's gaze fixed on something ahead. He slowly lifted his eyes and saw 3 long staircases rising toward a massive, imposing gate that towered over the hall like the entrance to a tomb. For the first time in a while, his eyes sharpened with real interest. "Is this the place?" he murmured. "The stench of corruption is strongest here." A cold, dark energy poured off the door in steady waves, filling the air around it with a pressure that felt thick and unnatural. Without a moment of hesitation, he stepped forward. Li Hoyal calculated rapidly in his head and came to the same conclusion at once. This had to be the core of the fortress. Every instinct Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo had was screaming the same truth. Behind that door was the master of this domain, Count Oscura. Granfell climbed the steps with unwavering purpose, his face set as hard as carved stone. The silence around him felt unnaturally heavy, almost deafening. Not a single other player had managed to make it this far. Then, without warning, Jessie dropped from the ceiling and hung upside down in front of him. "Found you," she said brightly, as if appearing like that were the most normal thing in the world. Her golden hair spilled downward around her face as she smiled with obvious excitement. "I saw it," she said, practically glowing. "Your magic was incredible. Absolutely incredible." Granfell Claudia Arpeggio. Romeo remained completely unimpressed, his expression colder than ice, as though her excitement meant nothing to him at all. "It was you, wasn't it?" she asked with a bright, eager voice, not even trying to hide how thrilled she was. She chirped the question so lightly that Li Hoyal could only stare in disbelief. "She's flying. What the hell is this?" I struggled like crazy just to gather mana, and hers is flowing endlessly like a river. Jessie clasped her hands together, nearly vibrating with excitement. "I have to know. I seriously cannot wait another second. What kind of skill was that?" I watched the video over and over in slow-motion mana recap mode, at least a dozen times, and I still couldn't identify it. And I know every spell there is. "Can we please talk about your insanely cool magic?" Jessie asked, leaning in with sparkling eyes. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo said nothing and simply stared straight into her soul. She blinked in confusion, clearly thrown off by the sudden silence. Then he grabbed her by the shoulder and pulled her firmly down to the floor, forcing her back to earth. "Mind your manners, girl," he said coldly. "If you want knowledge from someone else, the very least you can do is show proper respect before asking. Do you understand?" His gaze was sharp enough to pierce straight through her. Jessie froze where she stood, and for the first time, genuine fear crept into her wide eyes. Then, in the next instant, a chill shot down Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's spine. The great doors ahead exploded open with a violent crash. Crimson light flooded the hall like blood pouring across stone. From within it, a towering figure stepped forward, overflowing with killing intent, so dense it felt almost solid. System alert. Natural enemy skill has been triggered. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo narrowed his eyes until they looked like drawn blades. There stood Countera, silver hair, blood-red eyes, and bared fangs gleaming in the red light. "Oh my," the vampire sneered. "I was wondering who dared disturb my sleep." "Just two miserable humans," he said with open contempt. "How truly foolish. Bottom-feeding mortals always overestimate themselves." His murderous aura exploded outward in a violent wave, crushing the air itself. Jessie panicked instantly. "It's Count Escura," she cried. "Ugh, his presence is crushing me. Mr. Cool Magic, are you okay?" Even her usual excitement was gone now, replaced by raw fear as the room filled with the monster's overwhelming pressure. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio. Romeo let out a scornful scoff. "A count? Don't make me laugh." He raised the blood-soaked necklace without the slightest tremor, his will firm and unshakable. "You are nothing more than a filthy, low-born vampire." At once, the system reacted. The necklace steeped in the curse of blood has been selected as the tribute. He crushed the pendant in his fist without hesitation. "I shall teach you a lesson for daring to imitate true nobility," he said, his contempt sharper than any blade. His eyes burned with a lethal, merciless intent, cold and steady enough to make the very air around him feel dangerous. System initiating exorcism ritual. Quest. The counterattack begins. Vampire hunt initiated. The mechanical announcement rang out with chilling clarity, as though the world itself had acknowledged the start of the hunt. As Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo raised the artifact, Li Hoyo's heart nearly stopped. Right, the exorcism ritual needed a sacrifice. He is really planning to drag Escura into his own subconscious and fight him there. The realization hit him so hard it sent panic racing through his chest. So that was what he meant back then. The memory came rushing back in a flash. Li Hoy had once asked, "How are you supposed to make a monster like that feel fear, Granfell Claudia Arpeggio?" And Romeo had answered in that same calm, certain voice. "Because I am a demon hunter." But Li Hoy still could not stop doubting. Will this really work? Count Oscura is a level 430 raid boss. If this goes wrong, his soul could be swallowed whole. Oscura only laughed when he saw the artifact. "What is that filthy little trinket? You truly are pathetic, human." Before Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo could even blink, a crushing wave of killing intent slammed into him like a physical blow. Oscura slowly lifted one clawed hand, his eyes glowing with bloodthirsty delight. "Interesting," he said with a sneer. "I almost admire that arrogance of yours. But in the end, you are still nothing more than an insect beneath me." Jessie screamed and clutched her hat with both hands. "No. Countera is drawing power from his minions." Li Hoy's face went pale. This is bad. He was already around level 300, and now the gap is stretching wider and wider, like some broken leveling Manhwa system spinning out of control. Then, suddenly, the blood pendant pulsed with a pale, ghostly light. Escura's eyes widened at once, and the look on his face changed for the first time. The amusement vanished from his expression in an instant, wiped away so completely that it was almost frightening to watch. In the blink of an eye, the world shifted. The castle, the hall, the crimson light. Everything was gone as if it had been torn away. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo now stood atop a jagged cliff, looking down from above with cold authority. Isira turned his head sharply, disoriented, his voice edged with alarm. "Where is this?" Sensing a presence behind him, the vampire turned and flashed a sinister grin at Granfell Plotty, Arpeggio Romeo. Even then, Escura began to gather dark energy into his hands, trying to regain control of the situation. A cheap little parlor trick, he spat. That is all this is, you low-born mortal. However, I can break this illusion apart and crush your soul along with it. He lifted his face, crimson light blazing in his eyes as dark runes ignited across the sky above them. Hellfire poured down from the heavens in a raging storm, and the impact triggered a catastrophic explosion that swallowed the entire area in heat, smoke, and violent red light. Staring into the inferno, Asira smirked with cruel satisfaction. I had hoped you might entertain me a little longer, but it seems your fragile little body has already burned to ash. I knew you were trash from the start, but, from within the smoke, Granfell Clot Arpeggio Romeo's voice cut through the fire, followed by a faint smile. Is that truly all you can see? Oscar froze where he stood. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo was still there, standing completely unharmed, not even singed, as though the flames had never touched him at all. The vampire roared, veins standing out around his eyes in fury and disbelief. How? How are you still alive? His voice cracked under the strain of shock. Granfell Claudio Arpeggio Romeo looked down from his higher ground, radiating such absolute dominance that the difference between them felt crushing and unmistakable. Look carefully, Oscura, he said in a cold, measured tone. See for yourself which one of us is truly fated to die here today. Oscura flinched. A raw, primal terror suddenly seized him from the inside, the kind of fear that reached deeper than reason. Cold sweat soaked his back. In one horrifying flash, he saw a vision of his own end, broken, lifeless, defeated beyond recovery. The vampire lord stood there paralyzed, trembling so badly he could barely breathe, his voice reduced to a fearful stammer he could not control. Then reality came crashing back around him. Oscura grabbed at his face and unleashed a terrifying burst of murderous aura, as if rage alone could erase what he had just felt. He refused to accept what his own eyes had shown him. This was absurd. Impossible. There was no way it could be real. It had to be some cheap trick, some fraudulent deception. Yes, that had to be it, a bluff, an illusion, something flimsy enough for him to tear apart. He tried desperately to calm his trembling heart with that thought. Meanwhile, Jesse stood nearby in total confusion. What is even happening right now? The young mage remained frozen like a statue, but Count Escura was rapidly losing his mind. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo curled his lips into a proud, arrogant smirk. Oh my, Acura, it seems you've finally learned what fear tastes like. Escura clutched his head and gasped for breath, terror twisting his face into something ugly and frantic. He looked less like a lord now, and more like a beast cornered by something it could not understand. Then, all at once, his power exploded outward. The castle roof was blown completely apart as he screamed into the sky, his voice full of fury and humiliation. Another insect. Always insects. The wind roared through the shattered ceiling, wild and violent. But even then Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo did not flinch once. Lehoy looked up, his thoughts racing wildly as he tried to process the sheer scale of what had just happened. The entire attic vanished in an instant. I almost died just now. I did not even have time to react. A chill slid down his spine, but Jesse was looking at him with sparkling eyes again. You knew that attack would miss, didn't you? You look so calm. I really need to make shielding a habit the way you do. You're seriously amazing. Then the system chimed again. Skill, exorcism ritual. Acura flinched hard and immediately threw up a guard. What is it this time? He snapped, unable to hide the fear now creeping into his voice. The system began its explanation in a cold, neutral tone. A skill that allows the user to attack a demon's essence without causing harm to the user's own body. However, when a tribute is offered, a secondary effect may also be activated. That secondary effect forces the demon to enter the demon hunter's subconscious. In Obscura's vision, a gigantic Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo towered over him like a living mountain, stretching out one enormous hand. The vampire screamed in pure terror. Stay back. His voice was no longer proud or cruel now, only desperate and shaking. Get away from me. Don't come any closer. He staggered backward in panic as swarms of bats burst from his body and scattered wildly in every direction. The system continued. Dominance in this mental space depends entirely on spiritual power, but there is no possible way a demon hunter would lose a battle of will against a filthy demon. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo merely crossed his arms and looked down at him. Li Hui's eyes widened in honest shock. I did not think it would work this well. Jessie stared blankly at the scene unfolding in front of her. This is unbelievable. What did you do to him? She asked. She glanced at Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo, then turned back to the terrified Ashura, unable to make sense of what she was seeing. In a hushed voice, she whispered, "He's screaming at nothing, and he's attacking empty air." Meanwhile, Oscura thrashed around in a frenzy, his mind clearly falling apart. Impossible. This cannot be real. How? How can a mere mortal overpower a count like me? The system announced, "Counter has been inflicted with a fear status effect." In the vision, the giant hand closed around Ashura and crushed him, while despair twisted his face into something pitiful. Li Huial could only watch and think to himself, "It looks like the fear effect works on demons even more brutally than I expected." Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo smiled faintly when the next notification appeared. Quest complete. A spectral knife materialized out of thin air, and he caught it without hesitation, aiming it toward the vampire groveling on the floor. Let's finish this quickly. Jessie tilted her head, still trying to piece it together. So that's it. Was it really the fear effect? Was that what you did to him? But how? Is this some new kind of magic? If it's a new spell, could you teach it to me? I'll pay you well, really well. He ignored every word of her excited rambling. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo brought the knife down without hesitation, but then suddenly stopped, staring at the blood-stained blade in confusion. Esso was still shivering on the floor, clutching his head in terror, yet his health bar had barely moved at all. The attack had clearly landed, but the result was far smaller than it should have been, leaving a strange and uneasy silence hanging in the air. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo understood the truth in an instant. The strike had looked clean, but in reality it had not dealt even a single point of damage. He turned to Jessie with cool, effortless calm and said, "Dispose of him." She jolted in surprise, clearly not expecting those words to be directed at her. "Huh? Me dispose of him?" she blurted out. "But you already did all the hard work. You're seriously telling me to finish him off?" She hovered there in midair, looking completely lost. "But you can kill him yourself, can't you? So why?" Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo looked away as if none of this mattered, while Li Huial screamed internally, "I wanna, believe me, but my level is too pathetic to even scratch him. Since you were strong enough to raid this dungeon in the first place, you must have real power of your own. Figure it out yourself. Just kill him quickly," he said, sounding colder than he felt. "Damn it." Jessie gasped and covered her mouth as sudden understanding finally dawned on her. "Oh, I see. I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I was the one who asked you to teach me something in the first place, wasn't I?" She swung her staff, and glowing runes flared to life in the air around her. As the spell formed, she spoke with bright determination. "So if I kill him and get stronger, I might be able to understand that magic on my own, right?" Li Hui looked up just as a bolt of purple lightning ripped through the heavens and crashed down onto Oscura. The shock wave burst outward so violently that it whipped Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's hair back in a wild rush, making even the air around him tremble. Li Huial went pale at once. What the hell is that? What kind of terrifying power does she have to cast something like this so casually? System alert. Count Oscura has been defeated. Calculating contribution points. Due to your overwhelming contribution, rewards will be distributed automatically. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. Ascro was reduced to nothing more than a smoking mound of ash. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo kept his arms folded, looking perfectly calm as always, but Li Huial was completely shaken. Even weakened, that was still a level 430 count, and she erased him in one shot. So this is what a true high ranker looks like. It felt like watching the protagonist of a leveling Manhwa step into real life. Jessie pointed excitedly at the remains and asked, "What do you think this is? Why is it still smoking like that?" Then, without hesitation, she scooped up a bit of ash and brought it toward her mouth. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's eyes widened for the first time in a while, and Li Hoyol nearly panicked out loud at the sight of what she was doing. Is she insane? Why in the world would you try to eat that? But Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo quickly shifted his attention to the class quest notification blinking in front of him. Evolution. You have completed the quest. A new class quest is being assigned. The evolution quest line has been generated. The message hung there with a strange weight, as though it were opening the door to something much bigger. He looked genuinely surprised by the sudden development. Then, before he could think it through, another voice echoed in from somewhere nearby. Jesse, all our debuffs just disappeared. Was that you? Did you defeat Countra? The voice was full of disbelief and hurried excitement. Her guild members came rushing in almost at once. Jesse looked visibly awkward now, scratching at the situation with a helpless smile. Well, about that. Blox's gaze shifted and landed squarely on Granfell Claudio Arpeggio Romeo, his expression changing as soon as he noticed him standing there. That man. Jesse turned toward Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo, as if she were suddenly unsure how to explain anything properly, and even that small hesitation seemed to confuse him. Then she bowed. Please forgive me. I'm not used to formal greetings like this, but I'll do my best. Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo remained perfectly composed, his expression as icy and unreadable as ever. Jesse placed a hand over her heart with sincere goodwill and said, My name is Jesse Hines. If it isn't too rude of me, may I ask for your name? For a moment, everyone around them fell completely silent. Jesse stood facing Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo, waiting for his answer with careful seriousness. Her eyes were full of expectation. He fell into quiet thought. She admitted that she lacked manners, but she is trying to correct herself. She is making a real effort to learn. Very well. I will tell her my name. Let that be the reward for her attitude. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the same indifferent chill as always, yet there was something faintly regal in it too. I am Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo. Meanwhile, far away in a modest apartment kitchen, the warm smell of simmering soup filled the air and softened the room with an ordinary kind of comfort. At the same time, the sound of a television drifted into the kitchen from the living room. On the screen, a man was hurrying through the main gate, and in the next breath the statue sprang to life and attacked him. The nearby players had not even been able to react. As the statue shattered into pieces on the broadcast, little Arung sat in the living room completely glued to the TV. Behind her, her mother Lee Yunhee moved busily around the kitchen, cooking while balancing a phone on her shoulder. Yes, I'm fine. Arung is fine too. Raising her by myself is already exhausting enough without you worrying over me. The TV report continued in the background. Reporters had already arrived at the site of Count Oscara's castle, but by then the vampire had already been reduced to dust. Little Li Rang ran toward her mother excitedly. Mommy, mommy. Yunhee answered gently into the phone, distracted for a moment as she overlooked the child. Any news? The reporter's voice kept droning on from the screen. The players who cleared this dungeon are Jesse and Li Hoyol. Orang waved her arms desperately, trying to pull her mother's attention back to the TV. Mom, look. It's on TV. The little girl's face lit up with pure delight. Uncle Li Hoi is on TV. Li Yunhee paused mid-motion, caught off guard. Orang, why would your uncle be on television? Then the screen changed, showing a close-up of Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo's face in sharp detail for the entire nation to see. Yunhee froze completely, too stunned to speak. There he was on national television, introducing himself in that calm, lofty tone while the camera pushed even closer onto his face. I am Granfell Claudia Arpeggio Romeo. It was the kind of disaster no one could possibly have prepared for. She did not even know how to begin reacting to what she had just seen, but little Lorang only cheered louder, thrilled that her uncle looked so cool on screen. A short while later, back at the shared apartment, Granfell's phone was under total siege, vibrating non-stop from a merciless flood of calls from family members. Holding the endlessly shaking phone in one hand, Granfell sank into deep thought as he stared at the caller ID. The name displayed was his second oldest sister. He let out a long, steady breath while listening to the internet explode over his latest appearance. Who was the mysterious player? Li Hoi, who really cleared the raid? He had expected this kind of chaos after defeating Iskura in this leveling manhwa kind of world. But seeing his face spread across every social media platform made one thing painfully clear. It was only a matter of time before his family found out everything. As he stared at the growing pile of missed calls from his older sisters, a deep, awkward tension crept over him and sat heavily in his chest. Then, all of a sudden, his third sister's ringtone pierced the silence and made him flinch on reflex. A flood of old memories rushed back at once. Memories of growing up surrounded by three older sisters who were loud, aggressive, and terrifyingly united whenever it came to him. He paused there, trapped for a moment in the trauma of the past. Lee Hoyal recalled the unforgettable affection of his beloved sisters, which mostly sounded like, "Why are you following us? Go away." Lee Hoy scram. Those words had carved themselves into his soul and lingered there like ghosts that refused to be exorcised. He truly did not want to answer. Who knew what kind of verbal attack was waiting on the other side of the call? Then a thunderous pounding exploded from the front door, making Lee Hoy jump so hard it felt like his heart left his body. "Hey, Lee Hoy," his sisters shouted from the hallway. "We know you're in there. Open this door right now." And when Lee Hoy did not answer immediately, their voices sharpened into a terrifying ultimatum that struck real fear into him. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Do you want to die? Open the door while I'm still asking nicely." The threat sounded frighteningly sincere. With no escape left, Granfell finally surrendered himself to fate. Standing outside were the eldest sister Lee Yuni with her daughter Lee Arong, the second sister Lee Jinyun, and the third sister Lee Yuram. But the instant the door opened, all of them stopped dead and stared. Lee Yuni gasped. Oh my God! The reason for their shock was Granfell himself. Their little brother had changed so much he barely looked like the same person anymore. He stood there in an immaculate suit, as polished as someone on his way to a royal banquet. He spoke with calm dignity, as though this chaos had nothing to do with him. "You are disturbing the neighbors. Please compose yourselves first." The sisters were left stunned by that sudden transformation. Lee Yuni pointed him out to her daughter and said, "Look, Orang, it's your uncle." Then she slowly removed her sunglasses for a better look, while Lee Yuram stood there turning pale with pure confusion at what her little brother had somehow become. Meanwhile, somewhere else across the city, in a different apartment complex lit by the glow of countless windows, breaking news had already started spreading like wildfire. On the screen, the anchor announced the arrival of a new superstar player while Granfell's image flashed boldly for the entire world to see. In this Mana recap broadcast, a player of completely unknown origin had exploded into fame overnight. According to the report, he and Jess had brought down Count Iskura together, and the story was already turning into legend. Stretched out on his couch, Guildmaster Guan stared at the television without blinking, completely absorbed. The reporter kept going on, explaining that the mysterious player had refused every interview request and left behind only one unforgettable line before disappearing into the night. "I am Granfell Claude, Arpeggio Romeo." By now, it was no longer just Korea paying attention. The entire world had become obsessed with this strange, unreachable man. As the report continued to roll, the guild master of Jianine suddenly barked out an order with rough impatience. "Bring me a hot cocoa." A moment later, the reply came back calmly. "Here you go." The hot cocoa was placed in his hand, but even with something warm to hold, Guan looked completely drained. His shoulders sagged as he stared at the screen and muttered in a gloomy voice, "Taemin, everybody is talking about Lee Hoy now. Realistically speaking, do you really think he would join our guild?" Guan asked, sounding more defeated the longer he talked. "Even if we offered him a 90-10 profit split, I still don't think we'd have a chance." But Nam Taemin only smiled, clearly trying to pull his brother out of that downward spiral. "Why are you being so pessimistic, brother?" Taking a sip from his own cocoa, Nam Taemin spoke with calm confidence, as if he had already made up his mind. "There's actually a very high chance he'll come to us. We have his number, and more importantly than that, we have leverage." At those words, Guan jolted upright so fast he nearly spilled his drink. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Leverage? What leverage?" Nam Taemin explained it plainly. "The items we looted from the battle in Count Iskura's territory. We only got our hands on those because of Lee Hoy. So if you think about it, isn't it only right? Only polite. That we share the spoils with him? The moment it clicked, Nam Guan-min's face lit up. You're right. So then how much should we offer him? Guan asked. Nam Taemin gripped his empty cup so tightly it looked like he might crush it by accident. That part doesn't matter, he said with deadly seriousness. I mean this. Even if we fail to recruit him into the guild, we absolutely must leave him with a strong and favorable impression of us. To show just how serious he was, he clenched harder, and the cup cracked in his hand with a sharp, dramatic snap. To make that happen, he said without hesitation, we need to give him everything. Every single item. No holding back. Nam Taemin raised his voice and shouted, Brother, call him right now. Nam Guan-min was momentarily stunned by his younger brother's intensity, but then reality came crashing back down. The broken ceramic on the floor said everything. As soon as he noticed it, Nam Taemin immediately shrank, all his confidence evaporating in an instant. He dropped to his knees and apologized over and over while Nam Guan-min frowned and started cleaning up the mess. I told you to stop breaking my stuff. And at almost the same time, back in Granfel's apartment, the phone started ringing again. It was Jianine calling this time, but Granfell was in no position to answer it. His beautiful silver hair had been completely taken hostage by little Leah Rang, who was happily treating it like her own personal toy. She giggled in pure delight. Uncle Li Hoi is so pretty. Granfell sat there in helpless silence while his sisters stared at the scene, too stunned to process what they were seeing. One of them looked like she had mentally left her body. Li Yuni, the third highest authority in the family, laughed first. Honestly, your new hair color is kind of cool. Then the second sister, Li Jin-yoon, ranked fourth in the household power structure, burst into loud, witch-like laughter. You seriously look exactly like a doll, she said between laughs. This is ridiculous. Meanwhile, Li Yiriam, who sat fifth in the family ranking, glared at him with open irritation, as if his entire existence was somehow offending her. And what is with that tone of voice? She demanded. Granfell, who ranked at a painfully low seventh in the family food chain, folded immediately without even trying to resist. The wind is rather chilly today, he said meekly. What kind of tea would you ladies prefer? That was all he could do while rank 6, Leah Rang, continued happily wrecking his hair. Uncle's hair is so beautiful. He looks like a princess. Even Li Yiriam had to fight back a laugh at that. Li Jin-yoon was already in tears from laughing so hard, turning toward Yuni as she gasped, Sister, I don't think he's pretending. I think he's genuinely into this. Li Yuni smiled in amusement. Our Li Hoi has become so gentle, hasn't he? But then Li Yiriam hesitated for a second before asking something more serious. So you're a player now? Did you somehow assimilate with your game character or something? Granfell gave a solemn nod, trying to endure the humiliation while Leah Rang squished his cheeks with both hands. Uncle, show me the Zillow dance. He let out a defeated sigh. Please wait a moment, my dear niece. But Rang was relentless and refused to let him escape. Zillow, do it now. Watching the whole scene unfold, Li Yuni smiled with a warm, nostalgic softness in her eyes. This really brings back memories. Li Jinyu nodded right away. Yeah, about 10 years ago, right? She said. The instant those words landed, Li Hoi physically recoiled, shrinking like a man being stabbed in his soul. But his sisters, completely unaware of the screaming going on inside his head, kept going without mercy. Li Jin-yoon continued enthusiastically. Wasn't this kid calling himself Granfell back then too? He even begged Mom and Dad to let him dye his hair silver. Li Yuni clapped her hands in delighted agreement. That's right. That's exactly right. Li Hoi felt like he could die on the spot. Please stop, he said, his whole body radiating despair. Did you really come all the way here just to torture me with my dark history? Li Yiriam stayed quiet, staring at everyone with a thoughtful, unreadable expression. The other two, meanwhile, still weren't finished digging through the ruins of his past. And what was that other thing? One of them said. Didn't he say he was going to greet Mom and Dad like some noble scholar? Ah, our boy has grown so much, the other added teasingly. Li Hoi was crying on the inside. Please, I'm begging you. Stop. Are you demons sent here just to torment me? He asked in utter misery. Then, all of a sudden, Li Yiriam asked a question so direct it cut straight through the comedy. The atmosphere changed instantly. The laughter faded, and in its place came something much heavier, real worry. Yuriam took over the conversation with a serious look. Hey, Lihoi, tell us honestly. You're not in danger, are you? Granfell clearly had not expected the mood to shift this fast, and for once, he had no immediate answer. So he stayed quiet and listened. Do you even know how shocked we were? She continued. I keep hearing that players get hurt in dungeons all the time. And when you didn't pick up your phone, do you know how terrified we were? We really thought something awful might have happened to you. That left him stunned. Warmth spread slowly through his chest, soft and unfamiliar. Anyway, they went on. We'll tell Mom and Dad ourselves. They still haven't heard yet, since they went out early to buy ingredients for dumplings. But when they find out, they're going to be unbelievably shocked. The sisters' voices softened even more after that. If it ever gets too hard, just quit, okay? Promise us. And remember this, we're all here for you. You don't have to carry everything alone. Granfell gave them a faint but genuine smile. He apologized for making them worry and quietly assured them that he was all right. But then, just like that, Granfell's whole demeanor shifted back into overwhelming confidence. He straightened up and declared grandly, I am Demon Hunter Granfold Claudia Arpeggio Romeo. I was born for this calling. Don't worry. Your big sisters are right here to support you. They told him, but Leah only giggled at his unexpectedly cute voice. Yuni stayed composed. Jinyun looked entertained, and one sister's face turned into a masterpiece of indescribable despair. At that point, Lihoi seriously wondered whether it might be less painful to vanish from existence than to survive this level of embarrassment. By the time the sun had started to set and even the tea had run dry, the sisters were finally standing by the door to leave. Liyuni held her child and thanked him warmly for the tea. Leah Rang waved brightly and beamed. Bye, mister. Granfell saw them off with full noble elegance. Please return home safely, ladies. Then he turned toward Rang with theatrical grace. Child, I look forward to the day we meet again. Even as they were leaving, the sisters gave him one final round of nagging. Anyway, Lihoi, call us more often. If anything happens, contact us immediately. And don't go doing anything dangerous. Granfell bowed obediently. Yes, sister. Then, out of nowhere, one of them shrieked as if she had just been struck by lightning. She whipped around toward Granfell so suddenly that even he flinched in surprise. And remember to save your money. And don't co-sign loans for anybody. The warning came so suddenly and so seriously that it stuck in his head at once. Save? Save what? I'm broke, he thought bitterly. But then reality snapped back into place like a rubber band hitting skin. Oh right, the reward from the main rift. He had almost forgotten about that entirely. In this world shaped by leveling mechanics, the developers of Arcana paid out rewards according to both difficulty and contribution rate. The harder the content and the greater your impact, the more ridiculous the payout could become. Finally alone, Lihoi picked up his phone with trembling hands. There had even been rumors going around that the CEO was paying out of his own pocket just to protect the company's public image after everything that had happened. How much could it possibly be? He covered most of the screen with one hand and peeked at the digits little by little. 10 million. No, wait. His eyes widened further. Could this really be 100 million? Is that even possible? He muttered, hardly daring to breathe. Meanwhile, over at guild headquarters, Camila was clinging to Jessie and whining while Jessie sat there holding her tablet. Jessie, are you sure you really don't know anything? She asked, trying to pry information out of her. She kept pressing. You fought Count Escura together with that Lihoi guy, and you still expect me to believe you know nothing about him? Jessie's reply came back flat and cold, giving nothing away. I really don't know, Jessie said. Camila puffed out her cheeks and pouted. Don't be like that. Just tell me a little. Jessie barely looked up. You've been glued to weird YouTube videos all day anyway. Then Jessie's voice suddenly dropped lower, so sharply that it startled Camila on the spot. A chill ran down Camila's spine like pure killing intent had just brushed past her ear. Do not disturb me right now. I need to focus on this. Camila's survival instincts kicked in immediately. Fine, I get it. I'll stop asking, so don't be so scary. She backed away without another word and left Jessie alone at last. How boring, Jessie muttered to herself. Why is that kid studying Korean etiquette and manners, of all things? Just then, a notification popped up on the tablet and caught her attention at once. The completion reward for clearing the rift had officially been transferred. Back at the apartment, Li Hui froze solid. His eyes bulged as he stared at the account balance on the screen, and his hands began shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. How is there this much?" he whispered. No matter how many times he stared, he still couldn't believe what he was seeing. 11 billion, Li Hui gasped for air. The loot from Count Escura alone would have been enough to change his life, but this was on an entirely different level. Just how absurdly rich was this Granfell Claude Arpeggio Romeo persona going to become? Inside his mind, Granfell's arrogant voice scoffed coldly. "You feel joy over this amount of pocket change? Pathetic." Li Hui snapped right back in irritation. "Shut up, you damned aristocrat." He moved on to inspect the spoils of war. There it was, the Vampire Count's Demon Sphere. A system notification appeared. Rank, unrivaled. Level limit, 400. Effects, sealed. The item contained a demon's curse, and its true powers were locked away. To uncover what it could really do, it would need to be purified properly. Granfell looked at the system window with clear interest. Oh, an unrivaled rank item. A unique cursed item. How interesting. The old Li Hui would have reacted very differently. He would have clicked his tongue and thought, a cursed item? Even if the rank is high, the odds of cleansing that thing are terrible. Should I just toss this trash away? But now his thinking had changed. Wait, a demon hunter can use something like this as a sacrifice in an exorcism ritual. Back then, even if people mocked my class as trash, using trash items like this still meant pure profit. That was how I used to think. But things are different now. As that thought settled, he remembered the fight with Count Escura all over again. He had assumed the blood curse necklace was gone for good after being used as bait, but it was still there. And along with that realization came the lingering traces of everything tied to this chaotic journey. Li Hoyle, Marcello, Nam Tamin, Harkon, Jesse Haynes, Senios, Granfell Claude Arpeus Romeo, Cleo, Hoyle, Vangrith Tom, Granfell, Karamziva, Shrake, Beck Yiziel, Count Escura, Decoravia, Fayan Roth, Jessica, Lox, Nam Kielman, Ukshin, Enoch, Hakuna, Hisagi, Wygang, Leone Bellucci, Mathis Dean Carl, Alkari, Decorabia, Harkon Kingsguard, Hisagi Kazuma, Jessica Bright, King Hakuna, Kinver, Marcello Simuard, Narthro, Rox, Arung, Belia Yusha, Belia Yusha, Bench William, Camilla, Fabian Delon, Homan, Kiko Armin, Mathis, Park Wigang, Raymond Sean, Akimpatham, Mdugias, Beck E. Seal, Belia Yusha, Camila, Simaris, Countess Simuard, Cupican, Demon King Floros, Enoch Loren, Floros, Granfell, Han Moon Sang, Wigang, Jesse, Kuruan, Kichi, Leone, Lu Jinshun, Maya, Neferpitu, Nymph, Park Waikong, Park Hyunjun, Shurig, Skull, Sloth, Tamin, Talam, Talam Eber, Vangrith, Eula, Simuard, Aaron, Alhari, Amikan, Aries, Assembly Member Choi, Beck, Juseong, Belia, Chainwalker Hardlock, Cleo Odia, Count Surion, Dimitri, Dryad, Duke Swallen, Esther, Freja, Freya, Granfell Claude, Greed, Guyver, Haman, Henderson, His Majesty, Hong Jure, Hong Guri, Horican, Wiguang, Heil Krithiad for Season Leaf, Inazuma, Isabelmerl, Kern, Kim Nakion, King Haegu, Knight Harkon, Kojiro, Li Yunhai, Li Jiun, Li Yonho, Li Yerim, Leovi, Lu Jinchuan, Lohit, Lokid, Maeda, Maya Dian, Makuna, Mia, Nam Chiol, Nix, Park Wygang, Park Nambong, Pidinim, Pimbi, Raymond, Rhombus, Ryu Ojenshin, Secretary Kim, Sim Duin, Surion, Sung Hyunjun, Sylphid, Tamin, Wigang, William, Wolf Saccharin, Yinsu Jiam, and Yugwit. All of them now felt like pieces of a much larger story that was only beginning. System message, Blood Curse Necklace, Rare Rank. Required level, 300. Effect, when the wearer is attacked, there is a low chance that an instant barrier will activate on its own. It was a necklace made for someone drawn to violence, overflowing with dark and overwhelming magical power, yet originally intended to shield and protect the one who wore it. Li Hoyle suddenly realized what had happened. Wait, the curse is gone. The thought hit him all at once. Then my exorcism skill must have purified it during the fight. What had once felt like an ominous, dangerous item had now been completely cleansed in the middle of battle. The crystal sphere, the necklace, and 11 billion won. Lee Hoyle lay awake in bed with his eyes wide open, stiff and dry like a fish left out in the sun, his mind spinning without a second of rest. He was not worried in the usual sense. No, this was something stranger. He was suffering from success. His thoughts refused to slow down. 11 billion. What am I even supposed to do with 11 billion won? Should I lock it in a term deposit? Should I start buying beginner gear? But what kind of gear? What if I get tricked and overpay? Should I tell my family? Or would that only make things worse? His head kept racing in circles. Silence filled the room before Granfell spoke in a firm, commanding tone. Enough. Then, almost as if answering his own thoughts, Lee Hoyle muttered back, right. But every time I shut my eyes, all I can think about is buying equipment so I can clear more rifts. That was the real problem. His greed was practical, but it would not leave him alone. And finding gear that actually matches this character's level is a complete nightmare. I shot up 34 levels in one go. I'm already sitting at level 134, Lee Hoyle thought bitterly. Just a few days ago, I was only level 55. The speed of his growth was absurd, almost ridiculous, and that made every purchase feel wasteful. Buying gear tailored to a specific level was terribly inefficient when his stats were rising this fast. On top of that, mana recovery items were outrageously expensive, the kind of cost that could drain even a fortune if he was careless. Granfell cut through the spiral of thoughts without mercy. Put the phone away and go to sleep. My vision is worsening just from watching you stare at that screen. His voice carried its usual mocking edge. Then he added dryly, still, I am pleased to see that you are satisfied with your new title as a billionaire. Lee Hoyle snapped back at once, unable to let that pass. Excuse me, I'm a multi-billionaire now. Granfell gave a dismissive scoff. Wonderful for you. Meanwhile, over at Arcana Korea's branch office, the mood was far from peaceful. A tense internal meeting was underway, and the atmosphere in the room felt sharp enough to cut. Locke sat there with a junior analyst as everyone focused on the same baffling issue, the discussion already turning heated. The presenter cleared his throat and spoke carefully, trying to regain control of the room. Everyone, please look closely at this scene. He pointed at the screen where the footage was frozen. The moment the falling debris transformed into stone pillars, our immediate conclusion was that this had to be alchemy. His tone was cautious, but he clearly believed the logic behind the report. The staff exchanged stunned looks, clearly unconvinced. Alchemy, someone repeated under their breath. Then a senior manager suddenly slammed his palm against the table and raised his voice in open protest. That makes no sense. Full-scale alchemy cannot produce stone pillars of that size and magnitude. What is he supposed to have, infinite magical power or something? His disbelief spread through the room in an instant. The room erupted into argument. The presenter tried to defend his position, but the senior manager cut him off before he could get more than a few words out. A real alchemist's capabilities say otherwise, he barked. And aren't you from finance? I'm from the magic division. I know alchemy, and I'm telling you this is not normal. At the edge of the chaos, Swan rubbed his temples, feeling a headache pound harder with every passing second. This is exhausting, Swan muttered inwardly. Where is this conversation even supposed to go? In the end, the center of the whole argument was still just one person, Lee Hoyle. A junior colleague leaned closer, visibly trembling with nerves, and asked in a quiet voice, Senior, do you know anything at all? Swan let out a heavy sigh. We're in the exact same boat, Swan replied with a tired, defeated look. If you don't know, then I definitely don't know either. The junior lowered his head and admitted in a strained voice. I've seriously been dying these past few days. The pressure around Lee Hoyle's name had become unbearable for everyone involved. My friends, my relatives, everybody keeps calling me just to ask about Lee Hoyle. The junior groaned, slumping face first onto the table as if all his strength had drained away. And there's nothing useful in the Arcana database at all. No proper records on Lee Hoyle. No history. Nothing. Is that even his real name? Or is it some kind of nickname? Swan stared at his laptop in deep frustration, then quietly reminded himself, But today is Thursday. If the new update drops today, maybe the situation will calm down a little, he thought, clinging to that slim hope. Then, all around the office, eyes began to widen almost at the same time. The tension shifted into anticipation. It was the exact moment every Mana Recap viewer had been waiting for. A system notification suddenly appeared, sharp and impossible to ignore, instantly drawing everyone's attention to the screen. New region update. Greetings, players. A massive new update has descended upon the world. The previously uncharted territory known as Yusra Island has now officially been added to the map. The announcement rolled out with dramatic weight, making it clear this was no ordinary patch. Yusra Island, a mysterious region known only through rumor and fear, had long been whispered about as the Island of Terror. It was described as a phantom realm, a place so dangerous and so unknown that no one had ever managed to explore it in full and return with the whole truth. Every creature said to spawn there was nothing short of a living nightmare, something far beyond anything seen elsewhere on Earth. And now, according to the news anchor's grim voice, that nightmare had finally been updated into reality itself. The words landed heavily, making the situation feel far more serious than just another game expansion. Yes, that is the latest update regarding the Arcana system and the newly added Dread Island content. The anchor continued smoothly. We also have a brief summary of the regular Magic Conference, which began earlier this week. The broadcast shifted, but the tension in the air only deepened. Granfell watched the screen with focused eyes as the report carried on. The regular Magic Conference, the narrator said, is a fierce arena where veteran mages gather to compete, clash, and prove themselves against one another. It is seen as a golden chance for mages to rise to greater heights. Ever since Arcana had stopped being just a game and merged with reality, the event had gained worldwide attention. Among today's featured participants is the B-rank powerhouse Jesse Haynes, who is preparing to challenge the Magic Tower. The player of the day, ranker Jesse Haynes, soon stepped into the public spotlight, and the response was immediate. Reporters and fans swarmed toward her like a flood, throwing questions from every side. Miss Jessie, is the Magic Tower connected to Yusra Island? Are you planning to raid it together with Lee Hoyle? Before the chaos could grow worse, security stepped in. She is here strictly for the Magic Conference, the bodyguard said curtly, shutting the interview down at once. Meanwhile, back at home, Granfell casually performed one-armed pull-ups while scrolling through his phone as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Inside him, Lee Hoyle's consciousness practically screamed in disbelief. What are you doing? Do you even know who that is? She's ranked 4th in the entire world. Show some respect. Her power is on a completely different level. Granfell merely gave a cold scoff. A Magic Conference. Just then, a system window chimed before them. Goal: complete 500 pull-ups. Lee Hoyle snapped in frustration. Is that really what matters right now? Lee Hoyle shot back, utterly dumbfounded by how calm Granfell remained in the face of everything happening around them. Granfell replied as though the answer were obvious. Naturally, one goes to the Magic Tower to pursue knowledge and refine one's magical arts. He sounded perfectly serious, as if he were reciting an eternal truth rather than reacting to a chaotic modern crisis.